Hello, everyone. This is Yannig Roth from Didomi. I am replacing our CEO, Romain, who had an impromptu meeting on the TCF board with the IAB. So it is indeed an important meeting. He wanted first to be able to attend because it is a very important matter and topic, as well as a very important governance body. And so I'm replacing him. So sorry for this, even though the main subject matter expert here about the entire topic beside me is also Lucille, so she's still there. I am here with Lucille. Maybe Lucille, you want to say hi?
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone. So I'm Lucille. I'm a customer success manager at Didomi. I'm here to help all our clients to use our tool properly and to answer all your questions on the TCF today.
Thanks, Lucille. So we are starting for a good 30 minutes presentation. Please ask your questions if you like during the presentation. We will try to answer them at the end, except if we are wrong. If I am wrong, Lucille will correct me. If she's wrong, I will correct her. But if there is anything that we will decide needs an immediate answer, we will answer, but we will try to go for Q&A at the end. So let us start. What are we presenting? If you are here, you probably know what TCF version 2 is. If you do not, we will get there in a couple of slides. What we wanted to introduce first is something that I'm also showing here on the camera. In very small on the bottom of your screen, I guess. It is the TCF V2 checklist, which is a document that we have put together for both existing clients, but also for people who are interested in the topic and do not use a CMP already. Whether you are a general CMP user or no CMP user, or you work with one of our competitors, regardless of all of it, I think our checklist would help you to do the transition, either you or a friend or a colleague. So do not hesitate to download it. I will share a couple of links in the discussion as soon as I'm done speaking and when Lucille is speaking. So yeah, the checklist is a useful document for you to organize your transition, and we would be happy to help you get an assessment call either with Lucille and her team if you're a client already, or with Nesty, whom I will present later on, if you're not a client and if you're interested in Didomi's CMP solution. What does Didomi do? Let me do this very quickly because you probably, even though we have some people who are not clients yet in the audience, Didomi is a software provider, a software as a service provider. And the offering that we propose is a consent management platform. We have another solution called the Preference Center, but it's not what we're going to talk about today. And we allow you, or for you, we allow you to collect consent of your users, and we are going to explain why it's absolutely paramount today. It's not just about transparency and user information. It's also about good monetization, as well as analytics and many other uses. So collect and store these consents, because if you have to prove someone's consent, if that person is complaining, or your vendors want a TCF compliant consent string, which means a consented advertising signal to be able to deliver an ad request, they will need sometimes to get this information, and if you store it, it is better than just passing it on without keeping track of it. And on the last of the three parts here is to distribute this consent string. So Didomi allows you to gather, store, and distribute users' consent if you are using some or part of their personal data for users, including retargeting, personal advertising, audience measurement, etc. And we will show you an example afterwards of a TCF V2 compliant client of ours, so you'll be able to see what it looks like. We are live on but 90K websites and mobile apps, 90,000 websites and mobile apps, which is roughly double of where we were last year, which is a staggering growth. We collect consent on a very high number of devices. We don't on every quarter, and in total, every month, Didomi's solution helps collect consent for 40 billion different page views. So Didomi is a very scalable solution, whether you're big or small. If you're very, very small, it's probably an overkill to get a CMP because you probably don't use monetization a lot. But if you're a mid or large publisher or brand, you may want to consider using a solution like Didomi to collect and store and distribute consents. Some of our clients you can see here on this slide here. It's across the entire planet, from the US-based publisher Newsweek, some brands from the ad tech space, including Trade Desk, Rakuten, Orange, RTL. I won't mention them all here. We have a number of different clients, both publisher as well as brands. Didomi Solutions is not only for publishers, and it is not only for brands, it is for both. But if you have any questions about our solutions or our client list, let's take this to another moment. So let's get into the topic. We are about to speak about TCF version 2 readiness. It's in about 2 weeks, the deadline, August 15th. And the question is, how close are you to this finish line? It's a little bit like the final countdown. So I am now handing over to Lucille, who will be presenting you a number of things that you should look at and try to make sure you have implemented for the August 15th deadline, which is in 2 weeks, which is short. And if you're not ready by August 15th, you won't vanish. You won't vanish from the earth, but it's much better to anticipate. Lucille, I hand over to you, and I mute myself.
Thank you, Yannig. So, of course, I think you already know what the TCF is. I'm just going to go through a quick reminder here. So the TCF is a standard for collecting and transmitting user consent across the digital advertising industry. It was created 2 years ago, and it was implemented by all main players in the advertising industry. So the point is to standardize how consent is transmitted between ad tech players, as well as using standardized purposes. Next slide, please, Yannig. Thank you. So the goal of this new version of the TCF is to complete and specify the list of purposes. The initial ones were a bit too large, and we are now moving from 5 purposes to 10, plus 2 special features that are about geolocation. So this version will offer more information, more choices, and also granularity to end users, as well as it will also grant publishers with more control through publisher restrictions. So we're going to go through requirements of this new version of the IAB TCF from the first layer to the third one, and we will also show you a concrete example of a successful transition from V1 to V2. So the first layer of your consent notice needs to inform users about purposes and or stacks, as well as special features. These has to be about the ones that are used by the owner of the website and also its third parties. The TCF specifies that you can display either their stacks, so using their wording. Stacks are actually a combination of several purposes. You can also, if you do not want to use stacks, you can use the full list of purposes that you use on the first layer of your notice. Right now, special purposes and features do not have to be displayed on this first layer. So the UI also has to be prominently displayed, and thus it needs to cover most of the website's content. When it comes to calls to action, they also must be included in this first layer of your consent notice. They must include a call to action for users to express their consent, of course, and also to customize their choices. Both need to be of equal prominence in order not to push the user towards one more than the other one. So you cannot have a very teeny tiny button written learn more, and you cannot have a big one in bold and accept one just next to it. That's not going to be compliant with the TCF policies. Also, the refuse all button is not required on the first layer of your banner in this version of the TCF.
Which is for our French audience members here, and there are some French or France-based audience members, different to what is very likely to be announced by the CNIL, our data protection authority here in France, where Didomi is based, where accept and refuse have to be of the same level and same size, same font, etc. Let's not mix both topics together. The IAB TCF v2 does not require this. However, in France, it is very likely that in a couple of weeks or months, this will be required. Still very few publishers and brands use it. I just wanted to clarify, it is not the same, let's call it regulation, or not the same guidelines between IAB TCF that we're talking about here and CNIL recommendations, in which accept and refuse will have to be of equal prominence, equal size and everything.
Exactly. Thanks, Yannig, for the details. So there are other first layer requirements. You need to display an example of personal data that's being processed. It must appear in the first layer. So for instance, for a web banner, you can add a mention, for example, to IP addresses and cookie identifiers, just as we say here. And you also need to indicate very clearly that users are able and have the rights to modify their consent choices at any time. So this new version of the TCF includes the use of legitimate interest as a legal basis for personal data processing. So vendors can now rely on consent or legitimate interest, which must be indicated in the first layer as well. So vendors have the possibility of establishing flexible purposes and also can allow publishers to use the one they want for some purposes. Flexible purposes are available for 8 purposes. That means that vendors say they are flexible and they can use either consent or legitimate interest as a legal basis, leaving the end choice actually to the publisher, which gives, after all, much more control to publishers now. Google also, for instance, has now moved and joined to the TCF last week, so that's very new. They're not, for now, receiving and giving consent strings, but they have joined the TCF and they will be ready for the 15th of August also. Google uses legitimate interest as a legal basis to process personal data on some purposes. Another requirement of the TCF is to indicate that data is stored and accessed from users' devices by your organization and also by the third parties you work with. You need to have a link redirecting directly to the list of vendors that are used. It must also appear on the first layer of your notice and also be noticeable in the middle of the text. So I'm now going to explain what must appear on the second layer of your banner when the user clicks on Learn More. So we call that the preference view. This view gives users the opportunity of making more granular choices when it comes to purposes. So they must all be displayed in this view. Legitimate interest will then be set on approved by default. This view will allow users to oppose to legitimate interests. So as you may know, legitimate interest is considering that a user says yes until he says no. Consent-based purposes will also be set on off by default. For example, special features will only use consent as a legal basis. So they will always be set on off by default. Let's move on to the third layer of your notice now, and what should be displayed on it. This layer actually provides more information about vendors. Users will find information about every privacy policy linked to each vendor, and you will also find all purposes that are linked to a specific vendor that will all happen in this view. This version of the TCF requires also to indicate next to every vendor if he is part of the framework or not. So now I'm going to let Yannig show you a successful transition from V1 to V2 on a website.
Thank you, Lucille. Note that we have a question from Mark, but we will get there about apps, and we will get there a little bit later about testing and going live. Let me disable screen sharing and share another of my screens. Oops, there you go. So we'll go on, where are we? Here, sorry, let me just find it again. Up. I don't know, we will look at the website of one of our clients, Spanish client called El Plural. I'm sorry, I'm still finding my screen here. Application window. There you go. So you should be able to see now the screen or the website of El Plural, I guess, where you can see on the bottom, and I am demoing live here, you can see on the bottom one of the formats that Didomi's consent management platform enables on desktop. Then on mobile you have other formats, which is this banner on the bottom. It appears clearly, the texts are the right ones for TCF v2. It appears on my first visit. Obviously, it reappears after I've been there a couple of times in the previous days. One of the reasons is that we prepared this webinar well with Lucille, and it reappears. So keep browsing, keep using the website does not equal consent, which is one of the good practices. Now, I could agree and close. Obviously, I don't want to do it because I want to show you what it looks like. I will click on Learn More. I have here the right number of new purposes. If I won't count here, but it should be 12. None of them is checked. Lucille, you come in if there's anything you want to add. But again, remember that there were 5 of those lines, 5 of those purposes in the original CMP in TCF version 1. Now we have 12. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, which are the maximum number of purposes that are available. And this is exactly how a TCF v2 compliant CMP should look like. So good job for El Plural for its implementation. I will go on. I can of course disagree or agree to all. And if I go on View Our Partners here, I have the full list of partners that I can obviously go through, as well as block for all or authorize for all, or obviously go. Let me go to an example here. I don't know, Adapter, for example. I have access to their privacy policy and many other information, many other information, including the fact that they're part of the TCF. So this is what a TCF v2 compliant cookie banner, cookie consent banner. Tomorrow, a consent banner will probably ask for consent for other things than cookies, maybe universal identifiers or others. Lucille, is there anything you'd like to add? Or are we good?
No, we're all good. Maybe you can go back to the previous view.
This
and
one.
If you click on, yes, for example, create, any one of them, you can see that legitimate interest is opt-in by default. This is the basic of a legitimate interest, but here the user can also now disagree, but until he disagrees, he agrees for legitimate interest.
Okay. How come there are 2 different legal bases for one particular purpose, Lucille, for the ones who are not experts in the field? Does it mean that it's either one, or is it for different use types for the creation of a personalized content profile?
So exactly. Now, as I told a bit before, some vendors can establish flexible purposes, which means that they allow the publisher to decide on whether a certain purpose will be based on consent or legitimate interest. As the IAB has a lot of vendors, the same purpose can be based on consent or legitimate interest, and we must inform the user about that.
Thank you. So here I have a very, very selective profile here because I've just agreed to one consent for one of the purposes, and I'll click save. Sorry, I have to close this first.
Yeah, you need to finish to make your choices to be able to save.
Okay. Okay, let me do it for all so like everyone sees how it looks like. I'll disagree, and here I'll agree, for instance. There you go. And then I can click on save, and I have provided the right information to El Plural, and now El Plural can know my user behavior on the site and send some of the information that they want about me, including some personal information, including, for example, the geolocation, to some of their advertising partners in order to be able to monetize their site. Let me unshare this one here and go to the presentation again. If there are questions about this, we can come back to it later. Disable screen sharing, and I will enable the new screen sharing again to go back to our presentation. Share. There you go. You should all be able to see our presentation again with the El Plural logo. And what we're going to go to now is what is important to do in terms of testing, which is this next section here. In terms of testing, what you should test before going live, and this is where we're going to be, it will be actually the next slide where we answer Mark about redeploying the SDK on your app. Before going live, there are a number of things you should test. Obviously, you need to re-implement the CMP because it is either one, TCF v2 or TCF v1. If you stick with TCF v1 by the end of the quarter, it is very likely that your monetization will go down sharply. So move over to TCF v2, and you have to do this by implementing the new CMP code that the Didomi team or your other CMP vendor will provide you with. Double check how you use the purposes. It's a technical detail here, but the IDs of the purposes are changing, so that it's something that needs to be double checked and tested before you actually go live. And do validate with your vendors that they are receiving the consent strings that you are sending them. For example, in Germany, we're closely working with Criteo, but also some other vendors in other countries to make sure, as well as you guys, if I may, meaning publishers, people that are in this session right now, are working with their vendors, which is why it is one of our recommendations to make sure that those vendors, including Google, are receiving the updated consent string. What to do after going live? Obviously, after going live, optimize, because you have 2 weeks to go. Consent, there is no reason why consent rates should go down, because it is not a rule as stringent as the rules that will come up in France, where you have to have agree and accept and refuse on the same level, which will obviously lead to reducing consent rates. But with TCF version 2, that should not happen. However, make sure that you have a look at this KPI in order to be able to monetize most consented data, as much consented data as possible. Again, confirm that your partner received the consent string, and then by the end of September, I think, Lucille, if I'm not wrong, the IAB will stop supporting the TCF version 1.1 altogether. Maybe you can correct me on this, or give a say what happens on September 30th. Sorry.
Yeah, that's exactly it, and that kind of answers part of your question, Mark. Your question is an excellent one, actually, because it's a big question mark about people not updating their apps. We will maybe come back to you with more answers about this as the situation goes on, because it is an excellent question.
I will just read it for everyone, in case, also for the recording, for the people who will watch the recording. Mark says, in app environments, not all the people update the apps. So users with the old SDK version installed will read the new texts. We will will read the new text we will have configured for the new TCF version 2 models. So if you don't, basically the reply is if you don't update the SDK, they will obviously not read the TCF version 2 texts, but Lucille, you know better than I. So you can maybe in one line or two answer Mark, and then if there's any things that we don't know yet or that we that are too complicated or too technical, we can take it to direct discussion.
Of course I will.
So in short, maybe you can answer for everyone in short in one or two phrases. The answer to the question is?
So vendors will continue supporting v1.1 consent strings until the 30th of September. Then they're supposed to stop supporting v1.1. That's the global answer, and you were correct, Yannig.
Okay, you're welcome, Mark. This is it for the gist or for the core part of this presentation, which is our presentation about the final countdown. I would like to point you to a number of resources again, and it's not just marketing material, and those of you who are already clients should be able to have other things than marketing material. We have access to our fantastic customer support teams, etc. So I'm just pointing you to a number of things. Again, there's this checklist here that I'm holding that is 5 pages with a detailed list of things to do before doing the transition. Now, if you have followed this webinar as well, or as well as the previous webinar, or even webinars, because we did 2 in English already, then you should, you don't need to download the checklist because you have all the information, let's be honest. So those are on YouTube. You have, this webinar will be on YouTube, and you're obviously here if you're watching live on Livestorm. Otherwise, you'll have access to it on YouTube. And on YouTube, on the same playlist, you will also find 2 of the previous webinars that our fantastic team held in the previous weeks and months. About the topic. So we do our best to be able to support our clients in the transition, and we have started as early as April. Then you have the team around, with the team around Charlotte, our DPO and lead customer success manager, including obviously Lucille, but also Damien. And if you are not a Didomi client yet, and if you want a free and non-binding assessment call about your TCF due to compliance, don't hesitate to contact our colleague Yannig Dumas, sitting here in our Paris office with us. He speaks a multitude of languages, so whether you're Italian, German, French-speaking, English, I think that's it. But you can call Yannig, and for other languages, we'll find a solution. But English is best. Now, let's close this presentation with a Q&A. Or at least we haven't prepared fake questions here. We're open to discussion with you if you have some questions that are either similar to the one that Mark has, or you don't have any questions if it was clear. We'll just give you a couple of seconds. Okay, it seems that we were perfectly clear, at least I hope. Thank you very much. Amazing. Thank you very much. First, Lucille, and then the rest of the team who helped prepare this webinar. And thank you to you for being here, and thank you for your patience and your diligent work on the transition. It is a very difficult task with a tight deadline in the middle of the summer. So congratulations to those who have already done it, including El Plural, but also other ones. And thank you, Lucille.
Thank you very much to everyone, and please don't hesitate to contact us. We're always very happy to answer your questions and help you out.
Merci beaucoup, as we say in France. Thank you, and have a good end of the week. Bye-bye.